Hello friends, thanks for joining me today. Welcome or welcome back and Happy New Year. This is going to be a combo November and December wrap up, kind of like a holidays reading wrap up since I didn't have time with all of the busy schedule that I had to film. So let's go ahead and get into it because we have a lot of books to go over. So starting with November, the first book that I finished was A Most Agreeable Murder by Julia Seals. This is a historical murder mystery set in Regency era England, and it's about Beatrice, who is obsessed with true crime and murder. She and her family go to a ball where this guy drops dead in full view of everyone, and it's clear that he was murdered. So she, along with a visiting detective, dedicates herself to solving the crime. And this was a 5-star. This came out of nowhere. So this was November's book club pick. I had never heard of this. It's a comedy parody of Regency era sensibilities and the murder mystery genre. This had so many elements that I love. The time period, the heroine who goes against that era's norms, humor. It had footnotes, which is something that I particularly love when fiction books have, and haven't read a whole lot of books that have it. I laughed so many times. It was easy to follow. The characters are all, like the side characters and the main characters, have their own weird quirks. There's a mild rivals to lovers situation, and it's very light, rated G, and I really enjoyed it. And this even has like discussion questions and some fun extra material at the end, which made it like a great book club pick. And I will definitely be reading the second book when it comes out this year. Highly recommend if you want a murder mystery with comedy. Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. This is the second book in the Villains trilogy. It used to be a duology, but the author is writing the third book right now. The first book, called Vicious, is about Victor and Eli, who found a way to gain superpowers while they were in school together in college, and in the present day, Victor has broken out of prison and is hell-bent on getting revenge against Eli, who is hell-bent on hunting and killing other superpowered people. And they're both not good people, and this takes place 5 years after book 1. Some new characters are introduced and things escalate. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I think that this was better than the first book, and part of it I think is that it came out 5 years after, so I think that her writing improved a little, and you get to know Eli's backstory. Sadly, not Victor's, but I'm hoping that that happens in book 3. It's a very entertaining series. The main characters are villains, but you can still root for them, and then they'll kind of show their true colors, and it's like a flip-flop of remembering that they're kind of bad people, and it gives, you know, gritty superhero comic vibes. The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, and I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by James Cameron Stewart. This is another historical murder mystery, but with a sort of sci-fi twist. So the main character, Aiden, is trying to solve the murder of this lady named Evelyn Hardcastle, who's murdered at this fancy party at this manor, but the twist is that every day Aiden wakes up in the body of a different guest, and the day starts over again, like Groundhog Day. So he gets different perspectives and learns different things, and he has a limited amount of time to piece it all together and solve Evelyn's murder. So I gave this a 2.5 star. I don't think it was necessarily like objectively bad. I think this is one of those it's not the book, it's me kind of things, and maybe going audiobook on this didn't help, but there were so many people to keep track of. I never felt like I had a handle on anything that we learned. It was confusing, and I found myself getting bored many times while listening. And there's also like some fat phobia that kind of comes out of left field and keeps coming up with one of the guests that Aiden inhabits, and like it was actively distracting and just felt bad every time it came up. I was obviously interested in the premise of this, and the timelines do line up in a way that makes sense the farther in you go, but this just didn't do it for me. A Good Day to Pie by Misha Popp. This is the second book in the Pies Before Guys cozy mystery series, which follows a girl named Daisy who's able to infuse her confections with a kind of magic, and she makes murder pies using that magic, which she delivers to abusive and evil men to kill them. It takes place in our world. It's like magical realism. The first book I gave 5 stars. The second book I gave 4.5. I like the easy to consume writing style. I like the main character Daisy. This one felt very separate from the first book. Daisy is participating in a baking competition TV show, and she discovers that one of the judges is a man that she intended to deliver one of her murder pies to. There are a couple mysteries going on at the same time. This book is very heavy on the baking competition part. The mystery honestly kind of takes a back seat to like reading about descriptions of various baked goods, the baking process, hearing judges like critiques, things like that. And while in theory I should find that to be boring, I found it very charming. It's like one of the most casual and low octane murder mysteries I've ever read. It's missing the character interactions and development that I loved in book 1, but I still really enjoyed this, and I will be continuing with the third book in the series. A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 4th book in the Court of Thorns and Roses Romantasy series, and as of right now, I'm all caught up on the series. This is the most recent book, and the first book is about a human girl named Klara who's forced to leave her family to live in the Feylands, and from there she gets involved in the deadly machinations of the Fae. There are battles, romances, lots of characters and magic, etc. And this book kind of marks a shift in the series where we're no longer in Klara point of view. In this, we're following her sister Nesta, who is very prickly and mean. And this book is all about her kind of healing from trauma she's experienced and about her complicated like situationship with a fae named Cassian. And I gave this a 3 out of 5. Definitely my least favorite in the series so far. And I won't get too into it because I've gone into it before, but my previous gripes about Sarah J. Maas's writing still stand. The overarching plot of the series takes a major backseat in this one for the most part, which is a bummer because that's what I care about most in the series, like in the world building and the really cool fights. And just to keep this short and sweet, I'll just say that I do not like Nesta. I never have, and this book didn't really change that. So this was a bit of a tough one. SJM really cranks up the smut in this book though, compared to others like even A Court of Mist and Fury. I don't care about the spice, so like to me it's whatever, but it was a bit cringy. Also, the best character in this book was literally a sentient house. And now to the books that I read in December, significantly more than I thought, but I took a chunk of time off work, so honestly I shouldn't actually be that surprised. So the first thing I finished was Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. This is a murder mystery. I've read a lot of murder mysteries recently, following a 30-something divorced mother of 2 named Finlay. She's a struggling author, and one day while she's discussing her current murder mystery novel with her agent in a Panera restaurant, this woman overhears her and thinks that she's a contract killer talking about like real murder and offers her $50,000 to kill her husband. So this is a comedy of errors, and Finlay gets wrapped up in a murder investigation involving the mob. And this was a 3.75 for me. It was funny, definitely not like a realistic story. coincidences abound all throughout this, and assumptions are foolishly made that makes all this plot work. But it was an easy read, and on top of the murder mystery bits, there are flashes of, the tribulations of motherhood, being down on your luck, and having an obnoxiously successful ex-husband, and there's a light love triangle element as well. I rolled my eyes a few times, during this, but overall it was entertaining for sure. I think I might read more in the series. A new one is coming out next year. I do own the second book already. I got it for like 50 cents at a library sale. So not a priority read, but I think I might continue. Godkiller by Hannah Kaner, narrated by Kit Griffiths. This is the first book of the Fallen Gods fantasy series. It takes place in a world where gods are real, and their power is determined by the extent of the worship that people do towards them. And we have Kissen, who's a god killer, which is a self-explanatory profession, and she ends up escorting this noble daughter named Inara, who's somehow bound to this god of white lies named Skedeketh, and they're trying to find a way to separate the two, like they're physically unable to move far away from each other, and there's a civil war brewing as well. And this was like a 3.5. I wish that I had loved this. I had high hopes for it going in, and like the cover is gorgeous. I love when gods play active roles in fantasy. All the god stuff was cool. I enjoyed the characters, especially Kissen. She was like a really badass. If you want to read a book about a badass female protagonist, the prologue was one of the most like engaging and intense that I've read in a long time. And this is on the shorter side, so I don't know, it should have been like, a quick snappy read, but the pacing of this was really slow, and like for a lot of the middle, aside from a few action scenes, which I did enjoy when they happened, I don't know, I just wasn't enthralled by the plot, sadly. I feel like this could have been even shorter by speeding things up a little or cutting some things out. I like many elements of this, but the plot was lacking to me. I'll likely continue the series, but via my library. Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, narrated by Sarah Sue. I listened to the audiobook. My fiance read this physically. This was a book club pick for December, and this is a speculative fiction following Klara, who is an AF, which stands for Artificial Friend, and you first meet her when she's newly awakened in a store that sells AFs, hoping to be chosen by someone and taken home. And the book is seeing the world and humans through the eyes of a very naive AI whose purpose is to essentially be a companion to a young person. This was a 2.5 star for me. It was very low plot, which is usually not my favorite, but the characters aren't particularly interesting either. The narration is like meant to feel kind of robotic, but all of the dialogue and interactions, even between the humans, came off as, I don't know, unnatural and kind of weird. The world building is extremely vague, and I know that's not the point of this book, but it made the story harder for me to get invested in. This was honestly an excellent book club pick for discussion, and we'll be discussing it very soon, so I'm really excited to have that talk about it. But narratively, it was too uneventful for me personally to find it a compelling read. I know I'm not the target audience for this. I enjoyed the start of it, actually. It was kind of a relaxing and charming start. I was interested in the setup, but as I said, there's a lack of compelling plot or characters as it goes on. It's more about kind of reading between the lines and implications, and if you aren't, interested in thinking beyond the words on the page, then this won't be for you.
Editing Sarah here real quick. I don't want to imply that I got nothing from this book. It makes you think about many aspects of the human condition and societal problems and like what love looks like, what the future of humanity might look like, various ethical questions and things like that. Like there's a lot going on, but most of these thoughts and questions are up to the reader to provide themselves in their own mind. There's very little hand-holding, a lot goes unsaid, and when I'm reading, I just prefer to have those themes more explicitly explored and integrated into the story.
Deadhouse Gates by Steven Erikson. This is the second book in the high fantasy series Malazan Book of the Fallen. It takes place on a different continent than the first book and follows many new characters and different storylines. One of the major ones is focused on a rebellion called the Whirlwind against Malazan occupation, and it results in the evacuation of their forces and refugees in a long journey that becomes very dangerous. And this was like 4.5 stars. It is very heavy at times. There are some horrific things that happen in this book, and near the end, I was legitimately furious at something that happened. Like, as I was reading, I could feel the rage inhabiting my body, trying to escape, and I just wanted to hit something. So it makes you feel. But there were some great new characters, really cool creatures, and world building, and it's all part of something larger that at this point I still don't know. I'm sure it's still early in the series, and I think that this book felt more cohesive and easier to follow overall than book one, even though book one was just really kind of a fun fantasy time. Definitely continuing this series, but I also need a break from the intensity of it. And I am going to group all of these ones together. It's volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Saga, written by Brian K. Vaughn and illustrated by Fiona Staples. This is a sci-fi fantasy graphic novel comic about these two people who are on opposite sides of a galaxy-wide war, and they have a child together. You can see them on the front of this one, and they're, from the moment that the child is born, from literally that moment on, they're on the run from people who want them dead. And these were basically all 5 stars. I love the alien creature designs in here. These made me laugh. They made me, go, ooh, or ah. They almost made me cry a couple times. Like, it's a great, fun story. The first volume has much more sexual content than you might think. It had more than I was expecting, so just a heads up. If I had to pick my favorite, I'd say that the second volume was my favorite, but they were all fantastic. I'm really looking forward to learning more about this world and the different characters and watching their child Hazel grow up. She actually narrates the novel. I did only own these first 3, but over the holidays I ordered a bind up of the first 9 volumes, so I'm excited to continue, and these were like just what I needed after finishing books like Klara and Deadhouse Gates. Dragonfruit by Makiia Lucier, narrated by Mapuana Makiia. This is a YA fantasy inspired by Pacific Island mythology. It's about a girl named Hanalei who has lived most of her life in exile, and she returns to the island of her birth and works with the prince named Sam to try and find a cure for his mother's sickness. And their last hope is to find a sea dragon egg called Dragonfruit that legend says can undo a person's greatest sorrow. This was a 3.5 star. The island setting was very warm and colorful, and the plot was very local rather than something that, affects the fate of the world or continent or anything like that. It was very easy to follow. There are animal familiars that take the form of tattoos, which is really cool. I think that the pacing was a little all over the place, and I never fell in love with any of the characters except for maybe a bat named Fetu, who was adorable, but this was fun. The dragons are part of the animal kingdom, which I enjoy rather than being some mythical creature. And this has very minimal romance, which is a nice change of pace if you're wanting to read a YA fantasy that doesn't focus so heavily on the romance as a significant part of the plot. The Kingdom of Sweets by Erika Johansen. This is a fantasy horror retelling of The Nutcracker. It's about these 2 twins, Klara and Natasha. Their godfather Drosselmeyer curses them as newborns, with Klara as, the light twin who's loved by all and gets everything she wants, while Natasha is the dark twin, relegated to basically live a subdued life in the shadow of her sister. And one Christmas Eve, they're transported from our world to the Kingdom of Sweets, where Natasha has a chance to get revenge against Klara. I really enjoyed this, 4.5 stars. I'd say if like you don't like reading about anti-heroes or unlikable protagonists, then you may not like this one. This is a dark story about revenge and regret, and Natasha is, you know, the hero of her own story, the victim in her own story, but maybe no one else's. I still found myself rooting for her. This is very descriptive, at times repetitive, but there are some, like, you know, there's some scary horror moments, some creepy imagery that I enjoyed. And I'll tell you what, the ending was way better than the way that the author's Queen of the Tearling series ended, I'll just say. So I enjoyed this, but I can see how people might not like the main character. This has a fairly low Goodreads rating, and I think it's because people probably don't like the main character. And ending the year on not the best of notes, I read The Awakening by Nora Roberts. This is the first book in the Dragonheart Legacy Portal fantasy series, following Breen Kelly, who discovers that her controlling mom has been hiding an investment account in her name worth $4 million, and she uses some of that money to travel to Ireland, where her long-lost father is from, and she winds up traveling through a portal to a world of magic and learning that she has a role to play in saving their world. Okay, so this was a 2-star. Maybe if you have like never read a fantasy book before, this could ease you into it, but nothing happens in this book. It's entirely set up for the rest of the series or the next book. I was actually fairly enjoying like the first 100 pages or so until it became clear that it was like, I don't know, going nowhere. This book lacks the narration that would give the characters more personality. The characters are like their dialogue and nothing more. It's just blocks of nothing but dialogue. The love interest is a ridiculous, callous jerk. There are gay characters, several gay characters that are just kind of very campy. I'm just not impressed with Nora Roberts' writing style. I've never read a Nora Roberts book, but I will not be continuing the series. I don't know, I promise I can give you better book recs than this if you want a good contemporary fantasy or if you're just getting into fantasy. So those are all of the things that I read in November and December. That's a lot, and I apologize. Well, you probably don't know, as I think it's been okay. I went to karaoke last night. So waiting to film this until after I went to do karaoke was probably not the best idea. I can feel my voice kind of straining. I don't think it's come across on camera, but if I sound reedy or thin or anything, then that's why, because I was belting out karaoke songs last night till midnight, till 11 p.m. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm going to be basically, to knock this out, I'm going to be filming my Beat the Backlist 2024 video right after this. So we'll see when that gets uploaded after this one. I hope that you guys had a good year. Let me know what some of your favorite books that you read last year were, or anything that you didn't like in particular, or if you've read any of these, your thoughts on them. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!